Now we'll take a look at an effect that's similar to the kaleidoscope effect from the previous lesson. However, this one has some interesting options. So if you're following along, we're in folder 2 of the chapter 2 folder of the exercise files. And so to begin, I'll be starting from an untitled After Effects project. And then let's grab the file rustedmachine.jpg. Let's drag this into the project panel. And then, just like we've done a few times already, to create a composition, I'll drag the JPEG file directly into the composition panel. So now with our composition created and the Rusted Machine JPEG file selected on the timeline, let's come back to the effects and presets. Let's come down to the search field. Let's type HEX, and we're looking for an effect called CC Hex Tile in the Stylize group. Let's apply that to our image, and we'll immediately see the default settings taking effect inside of the composition panel. Now, if you watched the previous lesson, this will work a lot like the kaleidoscope effect, or CC Kaleida, which is the official name. So over here in the effect controls for CC Hex Tile, if I come in here and increase the radius, you'll see that the size of the tiles will now increase. If I increase these enough, you'll see the original image showing up here. And then if I decrease the radius, the tiles will get much smaller. So I'll come in here and just increase the radius a little bit, right here to around 71. Next, for the center point, we can come down here and change the horizontal or vertical center. If I click and drag on this, this will change the area of the photo that's being sampled for the hex tile pattern. Then if I drag the y-axis, this will change this. You can also come into the comp panel. You can click on the target here and you can drag this around manually and find an area that you like. If we come down to the rotate settings in the effect controls, what this will do, which is a little different from the kaleidoscope, is instead of rotating the image, this is actually rotating all of the individual tiles around the center point. And there's a smearing option, which we'll take a look at in a few minutes. So to change some of the behaviors here, let's go back to the render properties and let's change this from tile to fold aligned. So what this will do is change the way the artwork is behaving inside of the tiles. So now if I increase the size of the radius, this doesn't actually reveal the original image. This changes the overall tiles, but it also changes the effect and the overall pattern that's being generated. And then similarly, I can make this a lot smaller and see the effect of that as well. So I'll bring this up to about 127. And you'll also notice that we can see the outline of all of the hexagons. So what I'm going to do is come back to the render settings and let's change this from fold aligned to fold seamlessly. And so what this will do is get rid of the bounding box of all of the tiles. And this will also sort of blend all of the artwork from the individual tiles into each other. So to see this, let's come down to the rotation property and let's come down here and rotate this around. And you can see how all of these individual tiles now folding seamlessly together create a whole range of different effects from this one image. And now, just like I recommended in the last lesson with the kaleidoscopes, if you find any particular pattern that you like, I would recommend duplicating that layer in the timeline panel. It'll be nearly impossible to get back to a pattern that you liked previously if you don't save the individual settings. So I really like this pattern here that I'm seeing in the composition panel. So I'll come down to the timeline panel, make sure that I've selected the rustedmachine.jpg layer, hit Command or Control D to duplicate that layer. I'll hide the bottom layer, make sure the top layer is selected. Then I can come back to the effect controls and make some additional changes. So I'll come in here and increase the radius after changing the rotation a little bit. Move my center point around, find another pattern that I like. Then I'll come back down to the timeline panel. Command or Control D, I'll duplicate that layer. Hide the second layer, make sure the top one is selected, and then I'll come back here and make some additional changes. So by doing this, I can always go back to the timeline panel, hide the top layer, show the second layer, or hide the second and show the bottom layer, and I have all of the previous patterns that I liked saved in the timeline panel. And now there is one additional option, my favorite option of the CC Hex tile, and that is the smearing effect. So to show this, I'm going to come down here in the timeline panel. I'm going to show my middle layer here. Then back over to the effect controls, let's come in here and change the smearing option. So this is going to make this no longer a repeatable pattern, but it is going to give us this really unique texture for this image. So I'm going to click on here and just drag. And what this is going to do is create this smearing effect where it's going to basically blend all those hex tiles together in sort of a random pattern. So as I increase this, you can see how that pattern is being distorted by changing the smearing property. And you can drag this up to a really high value, maybe around 50 or 60. And you can also drag this to a negative value. So we'll bring this down to below 0 and see what happens with a negative number. And of course, you can come over here and combine this with other properties. So we can change the rotation to move our pattern around. We can change the radius. So make the radius much smaller. I'll move my center point around a little bit. And you can just see these beautiful patterns and textures that you can get by combining the smearing effect with all of the other properties. And just like the kaleidoscope patterns we made earlier, there's almost no limit to the number of unique textures that you can create from a single image. And we use this technique to create interesting background patterns for all kinds of projects, including presentation slides for both PowerPoint and Keynote decks.